Good afternoon, everyone. Probably very tired of listening, even though the speakers have been very illustrious. But when Professor Saab requested that I share the story that I was telling my friends around the table, I thought it might be of some use in terms of showing how devoted a husband Professor Atamjit was. So this was a few months ago, and I happened to visit him on some personal business. I needed his help on something. I called him up and I said, Vijay, I'd like to meet up with you. And he said, well, I'm really busy. I go to the hospital where my wife is at 8 in the morning, and I'm there till 8 in the evening. So I just don't have the time. And I said, I didn't know that your wife was not well. Yeah, he goes, she's been sick for a very long time. So I said, okay, maybe I'll come and see you there. And he goes, fine, just come on over anytime. And then I asked him where the hospital was, and he said, you know, such and such place, and that he took two buses. Every morning, he took a bus at 6 o'clock, then made a change, and then reached the hospital at 8. And I said, well, don't worry, I'll pick you up, and then we'll go there together, and we'll sit and talk. So I got about 10, 15 minutes late picking him up. And I found him very anxious. He goes, I'm really late. Let's just go fast. And I'm like, okay, we'll get there. So we reach the hospital and we go to his wife's room, and she's missing. And I have no idea how sick she is or what has happened or anything like that, because I haven't been in touch. So he panics. He says, I don't know where she is. I have no idea where she is. He goes running around asking everyone, where is she? Where is she? And then they tell him that she's in physical therapy, she's exercising. So I'm like, oh, okay, well, she's probably in some kind of therapy. And then he points her out to me. She's sitting in a wheelchair, and it still doesn't register how sick she is or what's going on. And then he asks the nurse for permission to wheel her away, and he tells the nurse, she has a visitor, so I'm going to take her away. And he goes and he starts pushing the wheelchair. And then suddenly I realize that this lady in the wheelchair is not even conscious. She's comatose. She has no idea who is there around her or not. But not Professor Saab. It's almost as if she's alive and well and very much there. He hugs her, he greets her, he calls her his beautiful one. He says, look who's here, my lovely one, meri soniye. देख कौन आया आज तनु मिलन आज के चलिए तेरे कमरे दे विच. So as he's pushing the wheelchair, he's stroking her hair, he's caressing her cheek, and he's saying, की हाल है? ठीक सुनती सी? Did you sleep well? Did you eat well? I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, oh my gosh. And how does she eat? Where does she sleep? What is, I mean, all these questions, and I'm looking at her face, which is drooping. She cannot hold her neck up. And at him, like he's treating her as though she's completely fine. And then we reach the room, and then he continues to stroke her hair and comb them, and he asks her, "Tu ki khaya? Khana kha liya sida?" And I'm looking at him, and then he points to the ivy that feeds her, and then says, "Theek sutti sigi? Koi aaya si milan?" And just continues to talk the whole time I'm there. He just talks to her. Dekh Jasjit aayi hai, tu pehchane hai innu, kinne dina baad mili hai tu innu. Just very, like, all one-sided, and the lady is just, her head slumped. So a few minutes later, he tells me, he says, Jassi, main 3 saal to utte padhaya hai. I've been a professor. 30,000 students have come in contact with me. And there are tears in his eyes, and he says, today I'm all alone. No one visits me, not my students, not my professor colleagues, not anybody from the Gurdwara. Day in and day out, I'm alone. And I come here by bus, and I leave at 8 o'clock, and there is just no one. And I said, what about your children? He goes, I have one child. He migrated here. He was a colonel in the army, and he lives here, but he and his wife have to make a living. And they're both working day in and day out. And once a week they come and they give us some food. And I said, well, where do you eat? He goes, you know that guy across from where your auntie is staying? He gets his food from his family, and he gives me one pulka with his sabzi every day. I share his meal. And so then we have a conversation, and I said, Uncle, let's go out and eat. So he agrees very fondly. He puts his arm around me. He says, Chal, main tum dasna kare restaurant mein. We go out and have a Chinese meal. We have our little discussion. I drop him back, and I ask him, I said, Uncle, you were so anxious to come here. You were so anxious that you were 15 minutes late. Does she realize that you are late? Like, I mean, your anxiety was really sitting very heavy on you. He goes, I don't know if she knows, but I know. He said, I know that I'm 15 minutes late, that she'll be waiting for me. And then as I dropped him off, he kisses me on the forehead and he says, thank you for coming. Thank you for visiting. My day will go well today because you have come. And that whole day I was crying, and I don't know who I was crying for. That auntie who didn't know that her husband was there all the time, from morning till night. Atamjit Singh, who was so devoted. I asked him again, I said, what drives you? What motivates you? Day in and day out, from 8 in the morning to 8 at night to be at her side. And he said 3 words. He said, she is, four words, she is my wife. That explained everything. His commitment, his devotion, his love, his anxiety to be on time, whether she knew or not, whether it registered with her or not. And I thought of how marriages are for the generation these days and how much everyone trivializes love. And I just went home crying, tears streaming down my eyes, so touched and moved by this man's devotion and the whole philosophy of life that was summed up in those words, she's my wife. Thank you for listening.